Hello and welcome to the Queermonga Institute and our Q&A Conversation for Exploration series. I'm Paul Robear, the Executive Director and President of the Institute, and along with my wife, Laura Lee, the Director of Research, Education, and Outreach, we want to thank you for joining us today. A brief bit of background: the Queermonga Institute is an independent, nonprofit anthropological research organization committed to expanding consciousness through the ancient practice of ecstatic trance postures. It was the insightful work of our founder, anthropologist Dr. Felicitas Goodman. She searched for the oldest evidence available, which she discovered in the world's collection of prehistoric and indigenous art, and decoded these selected artifacts as ritual instructions. And there's much more to this story, and you're welcome to visit us at our website at queermongainstitute.com. So, today, we ask the question, how do mystical experiences shape our worldview? Currently, the dominating worldview, especially in the Western world, are mostly framed through the lens of politics, power, economics, human assets, and development, but that's a very limited and short-sighted worldview. Throughout human history, people have always searched for more. And there's a revival of a different, more profound worldview emerging once again, one that taps into the ancient wisdom of our mythic imagination. As this more inclusive narrative is explored, which is rooted in direct experience of altered states of consciousness, or as an alternate reality, as Dr. Goodman would say, an awakening happens. Experiences that shift us into an awakening comes in many forms. Awakening experiences are moments in which our awareness expands and intensifies. We transcend the worries that normally drive us and feel the sense of elation or serenity. Our perception of the world around us becomes more vivid, and we feel the sense of connection to nature, to other people, and the whole universe in general. We feel a sense of love and compassion and a greater authenticity. We might even feel that we've lost our normal sense of identity and somehow become one with the whole world. A spiritual awakening can rip apart the fabric of reality as we've known it and pulls you forward into a new life of conscious growth and expansion. You wake up from the dream of everyday ego-based awareness to an expanded reality of spirit. We integrate the indigenous way of seeing, in which we view ourselves not as the dominant, but as an integral part of the circle of life. By transcending the old narrative that the material universe is all that exists, we restore to ourselves the world of a mythic life. We use the term ecstatic trance, ecstasis, the stepping out from the norm so that we may experience once again the ecstasy of our intimate connection to the full spectrum of the more than human world. This is why Laura and I have dedicated ourselves in our marriage to better understand and inspire this awakening. While challenging, we believe that the journey of life should be exciting and meaningful, so we continue to connect the dots, to ask more questions, and to continue the dialogue both within the direct experience and with you as a community to share this journey. To quote my wife from a byline of her radio program in the past, quote, "Life is best lived as an adventure. It's a big universe out there, so let's go exploring."
Indeed. It's a big, magnificent, interesting, curious universe out there, and I think that this work is part of the way that we do go exploring, and quite the journeys. What I want to say about this is that we view our experiences with ecstatic trance postures as a means to temporarily drop the blinders, to glimpse this larger universe, and that our day-to-day life necessarily needs to be focused on this reality. But that's just one of the realities that we can access. And so to sit quietly and look within, whatever your avenue is to do so, is part of that expansion. And that necessarily reshapes our worldview because we're pulling in more data, more experience. And I love also that conversation adds to that. I think that Every time we come to the table and we can converse like this, it's helping me personally, I hope you as well, to sort out that worldview, to put more pieces of the puzzle in place, to fill in some of those dots, so that a more vibrant, a more robust worldview emerges from that. And that is a sacred trust that each of us hold with the universe, is to figure out our worldview. Part of it is handed to us by our society, and part of it we need to fill in the blanks, especially around the edges. How far are we comfortable stretching it? I think that's a very personal matter based on our experiences like this that we find in these expanded dimensions. I think that we're able to put our focus on our shared consensus reality on pause while we view an alternate reality, but then we have to bring the two together. What does it all mean? What is our place in this magnificent universe? And how do we go about it? And what do we find there? What are your experiences telling you, be it with ecstatic trance postures, your own spontaneous mystical moments, mine started in childhood, and with various altered states and consciousness-raising techniques that you have in your repertoire? What does it tell us about what's missing from our conventional shared worldview and where it needs to expand? I love the outliers. I love the anomalies, because they serve as red flags to say, hey, a little expansion over here needs to happen. So how are we going about that? So I want to say that how, as a society, do we collectively expand our worldview? There is such a body of evidence that has been pushed to the fringe. What of it are those red flags, legitimate red flags that say, hey, we need to expand? And certainly we have those experiences here in our ecstatic trance. We are witnessing so many interesting effects that we readily can't explain, unless we just want to dismiss it all as hallucinations, but I'm unwilling to do that. So, and how will this new view, once expanded, read? What is the new story that's emerging? What does it share with our early ancestors, and what we can read of the legacies that they sent us, left us? What promise does it hold for a better world? So, what is going on with what I describe as the inner set of senses? I want to examine that for a few minutes with you. And then I want to take your comments and your thoughts on where you are at with your own worldview and expansion thereof. But for me, the senses are really interesting in our work. I describe it as we all have a set of inner senses that are activated during our spirit journeys to this alternate reality. We have this whole new set of inner senses. And I want to acknowledge that allow us to speak in the simple language of direct experience, because that's the best way we can be readily understood by the shared experience of ecstatic trance here. So I will be speaking in those terms. It has the same relationship to our perception as I watch the sun rise, while knowing intellectually that yes, our planet's revolution, its spin upon itself, and my locale coming round into the direct beam path of the star's radiant energy gave me the experience of watching said star rise above the horizon in front of me. But that, of course, takes too many words, and we already know that. So we speak in shorthand, our shorthand based on perception. So I just want to acknowledge that's what I'm going to be doing. So what could add to our worldview, to our owner's manual for the brain and the nervous system while on ecstatic trance mode? Well, I have this thought exercise, and it's based upon my musings of this question. If we could look at our senses as a dial readout, a measure of the effect of ecstatic trance states, what can we discern? That we have increased capacities beyond our general acknowledgement of our senses. Beyond the big five: sight, hearing, taste, touch, and smell. We all know that. But we could employ those everyday senses and more in ecstatic trance in new ways. This is our experience. That all the senses, I call them the inner senses, behave quite differently in an ecstatic trance state than in ordinary state. That's very interesting. Sometimes we experience a cross-wiring of our senses. Maybe our brain circuitry is linked. That's not usually linked up. We have a set of inner senses, some that we don't even have awareness of very often in our daily waking state. I'm going to be talking about some of those. We have evidence that we can train our many senses. The people who are perfumers, who can discern all these different fragrances, they say it's a taught behavior. You can learn that by exercising that sense. And I feel that that's true also with our inner senses. The more we use them, the more that we own them, the more muscles we have flexed of them, and they widen the conduit, and we derive more data even in our daily waking life. We're more sensitive. We're a better tuned instrument in our earth suits, you could call it. If the soul comes down and has this human body, let's call it an earth suit, and it's equipped with so many sensory apparati to detect what's going on in our environment, this environment and the alternate environments. So the more we use it, the more tuned that we find them, better tuned instruments. And it seems that by using these senses, we know that we have this extraordinary capacity for sensing beyond the big five senses. And I was thinking maybe that is just one of the data streams, the sensory input that helps us form our worldview. That much of it comes through conversations like this. I depend on conversations to expand my worldview. But also these senses. What are we sensing there? What is it telling us? What can we discern of that? So I Googled beyond the five senses, and I want to read this list to you, but I want you to think about what you experience in ecstatic trance while I'm reading this list. Because I think some of these senses that we don't ordinarily know, these are beyond the big five senses, they're at work here. So one is this called proprioception. That's the sense of where each body part is relative to the space around us. And you want to test it? They say shut your eyes, extend an arm straight up. You know where your arm is. You have a sense of where that is. We use it constantly, but we don't generally think about it. It's very helpful to prevent falls and injuries, to rock climb, to dance, to walk a balance beam. Well, in trance, we feel our energy bodies in extraordinary ways, right? We feel it expand, we feel it contract, we can grow as big as the earth, we can grow with the tree of life very tall, we can disappear, we can morph into another shape, another being, we can feel wind, we can feel forward motion, we spin. So we are very aware of where our energy body is, not our physical body, although some of that translates to our physical body. Maybe it's mirror neurons at work, but we can be we feel the energy body that we inhabit in our ecstatic trance states, wouldn't you say? And then there's the vestibular sense. We can sense the direction of gravity. Up, lesser gravity. Down, increased gravity. Well, we have often felt that magnetic pull down into the earth. We feel maybe gravity's pulling us in some new way. Maybe we can equate it with that, but we've certainly felt that. I feel heavy, I feel weighted, I feel light as air. I think that's that sense. And we can sense horizontal and vertical movement. We go shooting up into the sky. We go forward through time. We're traveling through tunnels. We can feel where we're navigating. Mm-hmm. We're not consciously saying, I need to go here, but this energy body takes us with it. And we can feel what it's doing in a very sensory, palpable sense. So I think it's that vestibular sense at work here. We can sense in 3 dimensions, going through the wormhole into the cosmos, like a holistic sense almost. We can sense in 3 directions. I'm expanding in all directions. I'm disappearing into a tiny point. The sense of balance and our sense of being grounded in a physical body. We hear that a lot. I feel grounded. I feel anchored into the earth. I feel its absence. I'm released to float on the wind. So that is a sense that is awakened in our trance states. Side note, research finds that some people with vestibular problems are more likely to report out-of-body experiences or to get lost, because that is needed in a good sense of direction. Mm-hmm. So we know where we're going. I'm here, I'm going there, I'm going up, down, in, out. Light detection. Our eyes do more than see. They also have a role in regulating our master body clock in the hypothalamus. There are cells in our eye's retina that send signals to this internal clock. that align our circadian rhythms to day-night cycles. We, in our modern era, have so many means of disrupting our rhythms. And to say in trance state, light detection, oh my gosh, we see light and shadow, we see movement of light, we see vibrant light, just white fields of light, color fields, colors so unique we can't name them. Not so common, but in terms of this body clock, we also feel sometimes, not often, that we're going back in time. That you're going back in time to the earliest moment of life arriving on this planet, and I'm back in the time of the amoeba. I've had that experience, I've heard it from others. Mm-hmm. We know that we're going back in time. However that's possible, we don't intellectualize it, we just go with the experience. And that's what it is. Talk about an internal clock. I don't know what you'd call the sense of how much time passes. Flow states, famous, been in them, for when an hour feels like 5 minutes or you are beyond time. We certainly have that in our trance states. People say, Paul, did you really rattle for 15 minutes? It felt like 2 minutes. Mm-hmm. Or this sense of, I thought it would never end. Or, you can have that. Or we reach that timeless space beyond time as we know it. So whatever I think that's the sense, our internal passage of time. I don't know what that's called. I didn't see that exactly on the list. But the sense of smell. People have reported celestial fragrances. I could smell the flowers and feel the flowers coming up, the fresh earthy scent of the jungle. I smelled the wind. That not common, but it can happen. A side note, I read a report in researching this that a hunter-gatherer group, the Jahai, who live in the tropical rainforest of Malaysia, demonstrate how we humans do have the capacity biologically to detect odors far beyond our common everyday experience. Mm-hmm. They took only 2 seconds to precisely describe an odor, while Dutch speakers, their focus group, precisely described in 13 seconds, not so precise. All they could say about a lemon scent was lemony, where the Jahai had many descriptors of getting inside that scent. So it just shows you that we are so focused on our eyes and our visual perception, the way that we're designed, that I think it's fascinating and juicy and delicious and wonderful that these other senses come into play.
Sure.
And they certainly do without any effort in this trance experience. And they say that if you want your sense of smell to increase, use it. Same with these senses. I think ecstatic trance posture and any technique that you have similar experiences like this on, I only know this lane, is that use it and it develops and it delivers a much more rich sensory experience to us. I also think that the olfactory bulb in our brain just sends a signal when we're burning sage or whatever it is that you burn. In Australia, it's eucalyptus, that you become tuned to that as a cue to start sending you into a trance state.
True, yeah.
That I think that is employed in ritual so much. I know that going into the old churches of Europe where they're always burning frankincense, you walk in and it's just like, meow. Oh my gosh, yeah. So I think that's fascinating. Temperature, I have to mention temperature.
Okay.
There are registers in our skin that perceive temperature. Of course, we all know that. But I think it's so interesting, and we always talk about this as being an indicator of being deep, deep, deep in trance, that you feel hot overall, burning, but it's a comfortable burning, it's not a painful burning, it's not a dangerous burning, but you can get very, very hot to the point of perspiring, yet it's not activated by the temperature in the room. Mm-hmm. Or it can be one body part. Right. We hear that a lot. Yeah, indicator of being deep in trance, or feeling very cool. And the coolness seems dependent on what's happening in your trance, whatever the scenario going on. I was burning up on the desert, but a cool breeze came and I could feel the cool. I jumped into a pool of water, it was cool. I'm in a snowy mountaintop and I feel the cold. I feel the goosebumps. Right. We hear that, not coming from the room. So they also, side note, link warm sensations with warm feelings about the planet, warm feelings about people, warm feelings about one another. That was interesting. EM detectors, electromagnetic fields. Yeah, this is a big one. David Elkington, a few weeks ago, talked about the ethmoid bone right behind the nose. Okay. Ethmoid bone right behind the nose that houses magnetite in our brain. And we share this feature with many other creatures, migratory birds, for example, who use it to cross continents and oceans as part of the means. They also detect solar radiation differently than we do. That helps them navigate across continents. Some people, and we've talked to them, feel that they can detect earthquakes before they happen.
Right.
And people have said might be tied to this piece of magnetite, piece of iron as a molecule in our brain by which we can detect Earth's magnetic field and what's going on there. It also may be that we're detecting information. Maybe this is part of how Earth communicates to us. Mm-hmm. If you want to get into a more outside the official, we are collecting data in our experiences. What is the conduit?
Right.
Earth's magnetic field is tied to the sun and the sun's energy and to the cosmos. It's part of the receiving. We always have that experience. We are transmitters and receivers. We must be tied to this magnetic field in some deep, deep way beyond just this. It must be there for a reason, is my conjecture. And that our energy body is in full swing in trance. So the downloads of energy, the waves of energy, it happens in waves. It hits us in waves. We imbibe it in waves so very often. Or we feel like a rocket ship. We're incubating there and this energy is accumulating. We shoot up into the cosmos. That's an experience. The energy downloads are extraordinary. We could spend a half hour, which I won't today, describing how they impact us, the different ways that they're delivered, the different ways. And the lesson always seems to be, we are blessed with this energy from the universe, from Mother Earth, and it is our job to give it out again, to just be part of the circuitry for the flow of energy. Mm-hmm. That is a conduit coming through us. It creates the joy, the ecstasy. I personally think it activates the different chakras in different ways with different experiences. It hits your heart. You're blessed with this emotion of universal oneness and compassion and love. It hits your different parts, different activation. I won't go into that. I'm just saying that that's a sense.
Right.
The energy, the energetics, the sense. Okay, last one. Cardiointeroception. They say that 10% of the population can sense their own heartbeat without feeling for a pulse.
Right.
Well, of course, when you've been exercising or when you're frightened or when you're tremendously excited, yeah, you can feel your heartbeat. It's like almost jumping out of your chest, right? So this is tied, people who rate highly in this sense also feel emotions more intensely, or they enjoy more nuanced emotions, or they recognize other people's emotions, so they rate higher on a scale for empathy. Now, that is very interesting, that sense also bleeds into your emotional life. Well, I actually think that our experiences are developing that sense and that we're more tuned, like heart math talks about. If you start to center yourself in your heart and feel what it's doing, you can sense how far it's reaching out, you can sense that connection with other people. Right. It's part of the exercise of flexing the muscle, because so often we end up with this huge heart activation that people talk about in their ecstatic trance experiences. We've all experienced that. I am one with the universe. My heart is expanded with the universe. I am in sync with it. I feel the flow of all life. I'm a compassionate member of the web of life. It has changed how I perceive myself, my duties to this planet as caretaker, as participant. You know, it informs us so much. There's so much with this. And I didn't know it was a sense, that the cardiointeroception was an actual sense. It's just so fascinating to correlate this. So I must observe that these senses behave differently in ecstatic trance than they do in our ordinary waking state. That something is activating them. I suggest that in trance states, let me clarify, it's across the board. I feel in many other modalities, but I only know ecstatic trance states, besides my own spontaneous mystical experiences. I suggest that a similar phrasing to how Felicitas Goodman explained the connection in her early research early research on the road to putting ecstatic trances back with postures back on the map. She described an early trance state, and this is an accepted theory of hers now, that glossolalia, speaking in tongues, is activated by the type of trance induced in the sermon and the services in the churches where you see speaking in tongues.
Right.
That the whole environment and the ceremonies and the take place put some people into a trance state, and the result is speaking in tongues. Specific trance state. I suggest, similarly, that for our work with ecstatic trance, with postures, that there are moments when the trance state temporarily overtakes these senses. The top 5, as well as these other senses, which we're now recognizing, I could add others to the list, that these senses, in moments in our trance, not throughout the entire trance, at moments in the trance, peak experiences perhaps, become activated. And our experiences then become very pronounced with this sense, and that we step outside ordinary waking state, outside our ordinary perception with these senses in our daily, day-to-day, non-ordinary states. That we now, as we transition into alternate states, these senses are heightened and influenced and overtaken by the trance state, and they expand their capacity to bring in this new sensory data and experience. So the question becomes, where is it pulling the data from to give us this experience? That's the worldview part. How do we integrate this? Is it just a really cool activation of our own head between our own ears, our own body? But the fact that we share the same experiences so often,
Right.
not just across the board we have shared experiences in trance, but we have within each visual group session.
Right.
There are shared particular to that group. You could do the same posture with a different group. A month later, you'll get a different set of the unique experiences.
Correct.
So there's something shared going on. That in itself is extraordinary. That is an outlier that really, I believe, in the next age, may not be in our lifetime, but it's going to be examined. I hope it is.
It's
I hope that
revealed,
this
yeah.
work can be a part of that mission to go, hey, people, what's going on here? I know it happens in other modalities, but I can only speak to this one, and it's certainly happening here.
So much
on a consistent basis. What does it mean? It has to tell us something about ourselves, the design of these earth suits, how we're plugged in to one another and to this larger field of this universe. And also, I won't even go into it today, but the lessons, the profound lessons that are delivered. It's an intelligent universe speaking to us, or some collective wisdom from the human race that we really need to get back onto track. But, I mean, all of these questions. I love the anomalies. I love the outliers. I love the red flags that say, hey, pay attention over here. Expansion needed. I'm existing. How are you going to explain me? Where do we have to stretch the bounds of our worldview? To temporarily take off the blinders is one thing in our experiences, but how do we take them off so that we embrace this realm and these experiences? Because something about them is saying it's not just a mere hallucination, it's not a figment of our imagination, it's not just a one-off, they're consistent.
Right.
And our work over the last year, where we have had the same people, and thank you to all of you who have done that, consistently come and show up, consistently have a journey with us,
Right.
as well as new people for the first time. Oh my gosh, look at me, I'm flying with the birds, I have a full sensory experience, I'm doing this and that. Or that this last Saturday,
Right.
so many shared experiences. We could go into that, but I want to hear from other people. I think the energetics is its own sense that needs to be recognized when we feel the energy flow through us that comes from beyond us. I think that our conversation with Gerald Pullick coming up,
Right.
where he talks about light as a nutrient, as water as a nutrient. When the two combine, that they recharge our batteries with this fourth state of water that can be recognized as holding negative and positive charges, as it's next to living tissue and other hydrophilic tissue, and it behaves differently. And now suddenly it's acting like, almost like neurons in terms of flipping negative to positive, negative, positive, negative. There's energy flow. I think that perhaps what he's going to tell us will demonstrate a conduit for the energy to flow through us. That's my prediction. We'll check it out with him. That somehow meridians, you talk about meridians, if there is this hydrophilic, water-loving change of state of water that's permeating our body, that can hold charges, it could explain the download and the experience that we have with energetics. Just a mad thought of mine before we talk to him, just having read the book. He doesn't address that directly in the book, right. So I don't want to put words in his mouth that aren't there. So I guess that's it. That is my notes. Thank you for listening. I hope it's been of interest. And I'm ready for your comments, and then I want to hear about first of all, did any of that make sense to you? Could you relate to any of those experiences? Raise your hand. Just tell me I'm on target. Okay.
Yeah, well, the thing is that when we start talking about all of these aspects and going into so much detail, because it's almost like as humans, especially Westerners, we need to reconvince ourselves that this alternate reality even exists. Even though we know when we look to nature that all of these aspects of what is considered ESP or extrasensory perceptions are there. Yeah. Back in the 1990s, there was a BBC special titled Supernature, and they looked at all of this technology that you can examine and find in nature that we kind of dismiss as woo-woo or something outside of ourselves because we've kind of separated ourselves out from that. But now, like Laura just gave us an excellent overview of all these different aspects and details of these experiences, but ultimately, it's all the common experience that we should be having. The abnormal experience is living a life without having that other aspect of the alternate reality. You're only walking on one leg. Once you have both feet, one foot in the alternate reality and one foot in this reality, this ordinary reality.
You are woken up in a new
way. Then you're living life, a full life. That's what life is intended to be. It was never intended to be this one short phase of life, this one little avenue of experience. And yet we've kind of lost our way, but we're regaining that. We're coming back to that. We're rejecting that whole thinking that would want to limit us to that one reality. And I like the word mythology. I like the word mythic concepts because it allows for us to explore a creative aspect of life itself. And like Laura said, we refer to the sun as a sun rising. Mythic languaging. It's so important. I don't want to hear the science behind the sun rising. Tony might. I'm not. I'm very happy with the concept that I wake up in the morning and I go stand and I wait. Here comes the sun. It's rising.
Tony is scientist and mystic. He embraces both languages. I want to say
he has a foot in both worlds. Go ahead.
Oh yeah.
But go ahead.
As does Christine. I want to say something interesting that we used to have these senses on all the time. I think it's about navigation. I think it's about earth suit. Okay, vehicle. Let's downshift, upshift, go where we need to go. Mode to hear the ends of the universe. Mode to hear what's right in front of me. Mode to navigate that realm. Mode to navigate this realm, to keep the body alive, to be part of our community, to dance on this planet. But we can dance on other stages as well. And I think that, as Felicitas Goodwin would always say, the ancients navigated both realms very, very effectively. We would do well to just take baby steps in that direction.
Right.
But that what our age has given us, though, is, I think it's all of the above is beautiful. I'm glad I'm in this age. We have gotten the technology to hang an eyeball like the Hubble telescope in the sky to see farther than our eyes can see. We have developed microscopes to see down to the infinite, not infinite.
Right.
I think that we're better at seeing the infinite in this ecstatic trance mode.
Right.
Those are the eyes with which to see the infinite and to glimpse the all. But that the microscopes have let us see far finer than our physical eyes are allowed to see. Mm-hmm. The particle accelerators, far finer into the tracks of atoms that they're smashed than we can discern ourselves in the physical realm. But that we have this inner technology that allows us to see far beyond our physical universe. And that if we add that to our technological advancements, that if we understand we are the technology by which we can perceive and communicate, transmit, receive, and be that liaison between ourselves and the universe, between earth and heaven, then we are living that richer, fuller life. Then we are reaching out to the nth degree of what it means to be human right now, and full measure of the gift that we're given in this lifetime. And yes, helps us live life as an adventure, because it is a big universe out there. The outer universe, the inner universe.
Well, and as we
we'll never stop exploring. We'll never get to the end, and I think that's a joy.
And as we discussed in the last couple of weeks, some of the greatest scientific discoveries have come from that inward journey, either through the dream cycles or meditative cycles or whatever. But there's something that happens, and there's.
I had a dream, and I woke up, and the Ouroboros gave me the key to unlock the mission. I want to go to your thought. Are you ready to go to thoughts?
Well, yeah, and just a couple more comments. Number one is, and I want to emphasize the point that you brought up, which is an amazing area of study and research that I'd love to know more about. But there's something about this avenue of social cohesion, this idea that a group of people come together and there's a shared experience, people from all points in the world. It was one thing to have that experience
in a kiva,
in a sacred kiva in New Mexico underground with a group of 12, 15 people in a circle. It's another thing to have that group of people, one person in Denmark, one person in Australia,
Egypt.
one person in Egypt, and all of a
South
sudden
America and Chile.
Yeah, exactly. We're having
Taiwan.
So we're learning more and more and more about this. But as we said from the very beginning, what has always driven Laura and I has been questions. When it's boring to pontificate. It's much more interesting to ask questions, to hear what people have to say, and to learn from others as the experience goes. So you'll notice that when we do the work at the Institute, we don't listen to your experience and then pontificate afterwards about what your experience was. We always allow for the fact that wisdom, that unveiling, that knowledge that came to you is for you, and you know how best to use it. And that there's no shaman, there's no medicine person that's going to step between you and that experience. That's your experience to honor. I have an experience from someone that shared with us in one of our journeys that said, while I was there, I was on a journey of self-reflection. It just left me knowing that inner truth is always there for me. I always have that to be there for me. It's the greatest liberator. And I think that the power of whether it's this practice or some other practice that takes you to this alternate reality, that it's needed. This might be that, when I talk about social cohesion of 12 or 15 people, what about 12 million people? What about the fact that our planet itself, with the challenges that are before us right now, if there's more of an opportunity that as we, maybe through dipping into the world of consciousness, that cohesion can come about. It might sound like a fanciful, unrealistic idea, but it's real. It happens. We see it happening over and over and over. And I'm not a scientist, but I can tell you that from a scientific method, looking at the amount of details and data that we've collected in the last year and the last 50 years of this institute, it's a real phenomenon. It really does exist. So how can that be multiplied into a world where we can have a shared cohesion of experience and possibly save ourselves as we go forward as a humanity?
Maybe it's a tool in our toolkit that we have yet to exercise on a scale to lead us away from the brink. I want to say that, we're taking baby steps. That I pine for the cultural knowledge, the cultural DNA that was the collective database of the 50,000 years that I suspect our ancestors were practicing journeys into the alternate reality, into whatever trance states, that we've lost that. But I will take hope. We've lost a lot of it. And I know anthropologists like Christine is helping to decode some of the legacy they left behind. We are helping to decode by reading these artifacts they left behind as ritual instructions. We haven't even gone into the body of knowledge that can come from a particular journey with a particular artifact. That's for another day. But I want to take hope that it was the spirits, however you want to define spirits, it was this kind of journey, this kind of experiences that taught the ancestors, and it's teaching us today. So my hope is that we can just start accumulating this data, adding to the data. We've already got a big, robust, through the world traditions, the indigenous cultures that kept at it, that kept their practices, their knowledge, their wisdom traditions. The world over, the sages through the ages, good body of knowledge. I think the big task for us is to start to honor it, acknowledge it, to partake of it, and to dive in for ourselves. There's nothing like direct experience. So I think that the gift that Goodman gave us is, here's the path, people. It happens quickly. It can be in and out in an hour. We take 2 hours because we're sharing afterwards with a bigger group. But here's the path. Dial it up on demand. Works the first time if you allow it. Doesn't take much but a healthy nervous system. No plant medicine, nothing, no accoutrements. Just a means to reach out to the universe and say, come on and engage us. Knowledge knowledge is there to be downloaded that we desperately need. So I want to end my comments with that before we open up.
Okay.
I want to start with Brian Tucker.
I'm going to have
because
people,
I want to say that one of the guests that Brian, do you want to click Brian on? One of the guests, Brian, and you are a voice of the mythopoetic language, which is so dear to my heart. One of the guests that you have suggested to us that you're putting in touch with is Brenda Dunn, who was working with Robert John, who we did interview back in the day, who has been looking at these realms and putting some scientific data to it. You want to explain what Brenda's doing and her interest in joining us?
Yeah. I just want to kind of first start by saying something, which is that I have profound gratitude to you and Paul for this year and a half during this period of COVID and the changes in the world. I think all the offerings that I've experienced from the Cuyamaga Institute have been soul satisfying. They've been enriching for many of us. And just hearing you both speak, your wisdom just in this short period of time reaffirms it's been healing for many of us during this period of transition. The world is going through extreme transition. To have a space where consciousness can be freely explored without feeling intimidated about sharing your personal experience has been so valuable. So I'm very grateful, first of all, for your work and what you've been offering to all of us online. Those of us who couldn't travel to New Mexico to be with you, it's a real blessing. Yeah.
Thank you.
Even we couldn't go to New Mexico this year.
Our technology's been a blessing. Yeah.
An exciting part for me of living in New Jersey is to be near Princeton University, which is like 30 minutes away. And, it's a hallowed institution. Certainly it's one of the many finest institutions. But what I noticed over the years is that it really seemed to lack the ability to articulate research and consciousness studies. And that seemed to be somewhat taboo in the academic world. But, lo and behold, there at one time was this physics energy and anomaly research lab. It was called the PAIR Lab, that was founded by Robert John and Brenda Dunn at Princeton University. And they conducted scientific studies looking at the effects of consciousness on the material world. Since the passing of John, Brenda Dunn has been able to continue that work through the organization, the International Consciousness Research Lab, ICRL. And so much of that work continues. And there's a wide network of academic institutions for which this type of work exists and is validated. So it's exciting to be able to have Brenda and other researchers, Roger Nelson, to be able to comment on some of these anomalies that you referred to in your earlier discourse here. So I'm excited that Brenda may potentially be speaking with you on a Sunday conversation.
You know some interesting people, and I appreciate you making the connection. Thank you. And you'll have to be here co-host with us when she's on. Yeah. So fantastic. What else do you want to say? Anything before we?
I just want to say there's so many things that I wrote down as you were talking. One obvious thing is that Joseph and I have been having this experience where we'll be kind of wandering in these unguarded moments on the margins of liminality. We'll be maybe at a flea market, and we'll see a figurine where somebody's collected a figure from South Mesoamerica in a posture, and we'll see this artifact reflected in this posture. We've had so many moments, like we've come upon a mask at a store in New Hope, and again, it seems to embody that altered state of consciousness. I've had the experience recently of doing yoga, and while doing the sun salutation, which many of us are familiar with, just realizing how central posture is to consciousness and all the ways that we shift in our day. I'm trying now to do a standing posture while speaking instead of a seated posture. But the work that you have been doing has keyed me into the centrality of posture and its effects on worldview. And it leads me to begin to wonder, if you want to change your worldview, change your stance, change your posture, breathe, allow one's heart, drop into one's heart, allow one's connectedness with the earth and with the stars. This also reminded me about another sense. You listed out various sensory experiences that we have. I don't know what to adequately call it. In plants, it would be heliotropism, right?
Oh,
Human soul, it's our ability to organize and to orient ourselves towards something beyond the light, something of what we might call divinity or theotropism. I don't know quite what the term would be without it becoming religiously minded or equated with religious. But Sister Margaret can relate to this, that there's a tradition worldwide of seeking spiritual guidance, seeking spiritual tradition, spiritual direction. And in many, particularly in the Christian denominations, you see a movement to kind of help inform the world with this notion of asking, how is the divine moving in one's own life? How is spirit moving in your own world? I see it happen across traditions. I learned of it through my experience with spiritual direction many years ago, and I was fortunate to work within, although I'm Jewish, I was able to work within the church to understand this concept. It was particularly the Quakers who illuminated this for me, John Youngblood. But that's become a valuable area for me to navigate the world. And I find that the trance work affirms our human ability to discern our direction forward. And one last thing I just wanted to point to was I'm standing in front of a painting from my good friend Linda Paladin, who's on the call today, of her late husband, David Paladin, called Shifting Paradigms. And it's my model. It's like my blueprint of what we're living through as a species. We're in a period of intense changes of our paradigm where worldviews are breaking down. And so often we forget about leaning into the potential future that's being born. So Yona French Hawk, Cherokee elder, spoke of our ancient past meeting our ancient future. I feel like whatever we come equipped with in this life that knows how to evolve, that's called forth in this time and in this work in particular. And it's pointing us towards the ancient future of our ancestors who will be living into our future as well. Ancestors in the past, ancestors in the future. So I just wanted to point out those aspects to what you've shared already.
thank you. Beautifully put. Like the whole coming together, coming full circle, we hope.
Yeah.
And that we should have an active participation in shaping that future, our own future, the collective future. We need to have a voice. Speak up.
As a species, we have a voice. As a collective, we have a voice as humans. But we're not the only voice in many forms of consciousness. It's exciting to kind of locate ourselves within a field of expanding and evolving consciousness. And humans are one form of consciousness, but we've not been the first, and will not be the last. There'll be many, many more forms.
And we should be responsible members of the web of life, and we should speak for those species who don't have a voice in our day-to-day, everyday experience. And it's really hard when you are traveling with the animal spirits, when you are flying on the back of a bird, when you are metamorphed into various animals, and you wear their moccasins, their paws, their flippers, their fins, their fur. You have it changes your relationship. You become that compassionate member. You want to stand out for the web of life, for the planet. Yeah, that direct experience. I want to say, you mentioned body shape. You're more aware of body shape. It was so interesting. Last Saturday, we did this posture. Oh, yeah. We call it the feathered serpent. It's found in Mesoamerica. It's found in artifacts in old Europe. A lot of Maria Gimbutas figures, you say, with the bird face. So we don't tell anybody ahead of time. We don't what it is, what to expect, the word, the name of the posture, the category, nothing. And we don't show the artifacts, certainly. And yet, we had several new people in the room, Brian, and everybody had snakes and birds. Snakes and birds. Blue and purple.
Snakes, birds.
Spiraling, coiling, flying, feathers, lots of feathers. Yeah. Dancing, feathered dancers dancing, another form of feathered.
Sure.
And powerful. So the main thing was, I feel powerful. I feel so sure of myself. I feel more confident. I feel like I can take on anything. I'm imbued with this power.
Sure.
Okay. So the question was, okay, now we're going to show you the artifact. Now I'm also going to show you how the ancients depicted this, feet apart, stand, and how Amy Cuddy, in her famous TED Talk of 2012, that earned 41 million views, titled How Your Body Language Shapes Who You Are, in which she declares, Wonder Woman stands like this, people, if you want to feel more confident and raise your testosterone to meet the challenges of your day. Go and stand like this for 5 minutes, because research has shown your testosterone will rise, your confidence will rise. This is 5 minutes standing like this. Imagine doing this in a ritual and that experience. So then I thought, wow, you all had experiences of snakes and birds from heaven to earth and powerful. Is it named? Does the Christine, I'm going to ask you about this next week, because you have researched the feathered serpent deeply in your shamanic studies with Mesoamerica and the American Southwest. But was it so correlated by the ancients because snakes are a symbol of potency and power, and birds, or was it direct experiences of these kinds of things? People were seeing headdresses and beams of, anyway.
Right.
Such another.
One more of our other sensory might be the sense of our profound interconnectedness with each other, with all of life. It's really spoken about the five senses, but what about that sense of being profoundly interconnected with life?
And the gesture that our experiences in this realm give to us to make us feel at home.
Yeah.
The acceptance and you are one of us.
That's why there's something when those of us from the Western perspective look at the tribal societies and see this interconnectedness of what it means to be a tribe, how the respect to the elders down all the way to the children, and how the functioning of society, there's an integration that happens that we just look at and say, oh, I want that. I want to be a part of that. How can I be a part of your tribe, and how do I fit in? But
I'm a part of this tribe.
Right, but that's where Dr. Goodman stepped in and said, you have your own tribe. Yeah, exactly.
Hey, is Linda willing to say hello? I look forward to a conversation with you and Linda and looking at the artwork of her late husband, David, and going on that journey. So, Linda, if you would like to say hello, we'd love to meet you and welcome you to our circle.
Okay, I don't.
Let us know.
Yeah.
Raise your hand. Who else? Oh, Sister Margaret, you were mentioned. Let's go to Sister Margaret.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hello, Sister Margaret. You turn on your mic. Take Brian's off screen now. Thank you, Brian.
Thank you, Brian. And
there you are.
Thank you, Brian. Well, Laura, did you ever think about what little children do? They take exactly that posture when they're in a power position with an adult.
I know my mother would do this, Yeah. So.
But Paul,
empowering us.
Yeah. Paul, there were two things you said that really attracted my attention. You started out by saying we live in a dominating worldview culture.
Yeah.
And then later you said that we're walking on one leg.
Yes.
The
Out
way
of
I
balance. Yeah.
the way I translated that is that we are so rational, um, and we haven't really cultivated this other half of our potential. And maybe not for right now, but I would be interested in our thinking. Why does our culture denigrate the imagination?
Mm.
You know, little children are told, "Oh, that's only your imagination."
Mm.
Um, and now, um, many writers are saying that the imagination is more important than knowledge in times of upheaval.
Yes.
And so, one of the great values that in fact, I actually use the term imaginal realm for what we're doing. That the alternate reality is an imaginal realm. And in terms of my experience, I think I was very lucky because my dad would tell me Bobby stories once a week. He made up these stories. And it wasn't until I was about 8 years old that I realized all he was doing was telling me stories about his growing up on a farm. But that those stories stimulated my imagination, and Bobby became real. Um, the farm became real. Um, and so I'm really grateful for that. And then what Brian was referring to, I happened to enter a religious community where we actually practice the Ignatian spirituality, where you read scripture and you don't talk about what you think, you enter into the experience. You smell, you taste, you hear. And so it was like, from my early childhood, it wasn't all that unusual for me. And then I went to Cuyamonga and I had the same experience.
Yeah.
So I think if we could value and somehow in our educational systems encourage imagination, I think that's what we need for the future. And then just one more point, when people were talking about smelling and tasting, when we would do when we would have workshops on the postures in Chile, sometimes we would actually use aromatic oils.
Mm-hmm.
And when the people came into the room, we would bless them, or we would put it under their nose just to stimulate the sense of smell. Or we might give them a piece of something to chew on that would stimulate the sense of taste. And that seems to help.
Yeah.
When we are in conference rooms or traveling to arenas where we can't light smudge, because most conference rooms you can't, we take vials of sage or eucalyptus and
Some kind of oil.
use
Yeah.
that. Yeah, I agree that the
But
olfactory sense is an
yeah.
important cue. So wonderful. I also want to say that I so wholeheartedly agree with you that why are we dismissing the data that our senses pull in? Why do we trust this set of data because we perceived it, even though we know that perception of our real world can be fooled, but we dismiss all this data over here from this other realm? Why is that not important? Why do we say some dreams are valuable to people who have their eureka moment and then the solution appears? That comes from the same place as this data. Why is this data not important? My point is, why is our direct experience not valued for what it can offer us? Just the experience of having it, but also what do we make of it? Why can't we talk about that and add that into the mix. I hope so agree. Also, kids today, our generation, what do we grow up in TV and movies? Where before we would sit around a campfire and a bard who was a professional storyteller, I'm assuming in ancient societies, who knew how to light up the imagination and pulling in descriptors of all the senses could bring that story alive. And on that story rode the wisdom, the cultural identity, the lessons of life, that they were embedded in that. So they were very important stories wrapped up in, very important lessons wrapped up in myth and stories.
Yeah.
So
Thank you, Sister.
I agree with you. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
I understand.
I suspect it's because it's a threat to the hierarchy.
I do too.
If ordinary people can be mystics, then we don't need the intermediary.
So important. Thank you so
you.
much, Sister Margaret. Yes.
Thank
And I'm
you.
going to go to Linda's next.
Linda and Brian. Why don't we add Brian too?
Okay. There's Linda. Put her on the screen.
Oh, Linda, what a joy to meet you. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll put Brian back up.
Brian has told us about the work, the art, and yourself. So welcome to our community.
Thank you so very much. I really look forward to sharing what I can that I've collected from David and perhaps some of my own ideas too.
Yes.
One of the things that came to my mind as you were discussing the avenues for these experiences is just the simple statement, lose your mind and come to your senses.
Well said.
Yeah.
And your husband, the artist of many of these, he was in a trance when he was doing his art.
David was able to paint in an altered state,
Right.
but it was like a broad, narrow focus where I could be sitting there on the couch next to the drawing board, reading to him or talking to him, and he would continue painting whatever was on his plate.
Thank you for that beautiful description, and that is exactly what it feels like, the broad, narrow. And I think also the activity of taking that and working it through your hands or words or on the page is such a valuable piece that is part of our ritual as well. The journaling, the bringing it down, the putting it through the physical body and into an artistic expression.
Right.
Oh, indeed.
That's another.
Yeah. So
I just would add one thing, which was that knowing Linda and then being introduced to David's artwork for me has been an exploration into broadening of my worldview. So David's collective work and Linda's life story is also among those forces shaping that change in the worldview. So,
you have us very intrigued, Linda.
Oh, Holly, you is. I hope I can live up to your expectations.
You already have.
Nice to meet you.
And I look forward to more.
Yeah.
Anything else either of you want to add before we?
Okay.
Thank
well,
you so much.
I got a
Bless
bunch of
us.
hands up, so
Okay,
we're going
let's
to take
go.
some more questions.
All
I'm gonna, first of all, I'm going to go to Sharon. Let me see up here. There you are. So you can
Sharon.
turn you on, add you to the discussion. There you are.
Hello.
Hi,
There you are. Yeah.
I'm coming to you from my garden in Hawaii. So I'm very close to the Institute, actually. Yeah, we're really lucky to be taking care of some property here on the Pueblo. So it's a joy. I just wanted to share yesterday, I wasn't able to join you for the trance postures, but because of work. But it's that time of year when the feline murder squad starts bringing things into our house. And so I'm finding lizards and bugs and, rodents and things like that. Well, yesterday they brought a bird in and I managed to get it away from them and was walking outside with it cupped in my hands and looking for a proper place to put it so it could pass without being terrified. And I was petting it and apologizing to it and looking around, and it looked at me, and then all of a sudden it flew away. And so, listening to the conversation from y'all now, it happened at about 11:30. So I think it was very close to the time when you were all, going through your discussion and having your experiences. So I feel like it connected me in that way to you, even though I wasn't actually with you yesterday. But then the other thing that it kind of comes to mind is that what we perceive as reality can change in just a moment. And sometimes being in two types of reality was an experience for me yesterday, because in that moment I was sure that I was trying to find a place for this bird to pass quietly. But the reality was that he was just waiting until he felt safe, and then he flew away. So it was just a remarkable experience. I wanted to share that with you, and just really share also my appreciation for the work that you're doing and everyone who's joining and that I'm having an opportunity to learn from. It's really helped. I work in public health, and it's been a very stressful last year and a half. And so having an opportunity to connect with other people and coming out and putting my feet in the dirt and, grounding myself and finding other ways to comfort my spirit right now have been really helpful in getting through the stress of this last year and a half. So thank you very much.
Well,
And doing it in such a beautiful part of the world and with such warm and generous and lovely neighbors as the Pueblo.
Very much. So blessed.
Yeah,
Yep.
thank you. Well, those of you that might not know, Powake is the Pueblo that is next to the Cuyamonga Institute. We've been the relationship with the Pueblo goes all the way back to the origins of the institute in the 1960s, where Dr. Goodman was close friends with the governor, and we've always maintained that relationship. And there's long stories there that we could share at some point.
And also the Tasuki and the Nambe Pueblos, want to acknowledge also
on
our
the other
neighbors.
side, yes.
Yeah. You mentioned the feline murder squad. My childhood cat, my mother was worried about the furniture, her fine furnishings. She didn't want to get them. So she said, you can have a cat, but I'm going to declaw it. So she had this poor cat declawed, and it could still catch birds. But it didn't hurt them. It would catch them because she loved to do that.
Right.
So we saw a lot, yeah. So
they're hunters. It's their natural instinct. So I can't fault them for that.
Right.
Yeah, I agree, Sharon. Thank you so much, Sharon. I'm going to go to Tony Hull next. He wants to weigh in on the discussion. And then, and then David after David, we'd like to have you speak as well, if you would, please, after Tony. Tony's been an ongoing participant in our discussions. For those of you that haven't been coming on a regular basis, he is our... I
don't live to work.
Yeah, right. And he's on our advisory committee. We're so fortunate.
Good wisdom right there.
Yeah,
I don't live to work.
Okay, no, enough introduction. Hi, Tony.
His T-shirt, yeah.
Hi all. Yes, thank you very much. I really like these comments. And going back to Sharon and Linda's comments, a couple of things come to mind. Reality can change in a moment. Yes, and then the description of Linda's husband's painting, a little experience. When I travel, I carry watercolor paints with me. I'm sitting in a restaurant in Edinburgh doing a painting, because that's what I do because I'm traveling alone. It keeps me company over the meal. And I have this rule that the brush leads the hand, not the other way around. So it's kind of like I'm seeing what's happening as opposed to me doing that. The owner
you build community. Every time you sit down, somebody will come over, I would imagine.
That could happen. But the owner came over and said, "Oh, you've just painted the Kurd flag."
Oh my gosh.
So I had no idea what the Kurd flag looked like, but he was very impressed. And he asked me to stay after the restaurant closed, where they were all going to do the man dance with the little fingers linked.
Oh, good heavens. So your technique is not to intellectualize it, but to just let the brush go where the brush wants to go. Can you describe that further?
I have some rules. I have 3 rules of painting. And one of them is after I make 2 marks, the brush leads the hand rather than the other way around. And I never try to make a good painting, and I just see what happens.
I love that. Fabulous. Yeah, that's sort of the
Yeah.
technique that we use at the Institute when we do our art and spirit workshops and gatherings where everybody says, I haven't touched crayon since I was 8 years old. They're good. It's a good time to start.
Come in from the trance, don't talk art. Yeah.
Yeah, while I mentioned this, and I have one other thing I'll tell briefly, is that this is objective. I mean, I couldn't quite make this up. I mean, there's no way I can explain this. That I painted a curd flag that I had no idea what it looked like in a curd restaurant in Edinburgh. And I like that. And if I could, with one other story, and I may have told it before, but I think we have enough new people here. This goes back to graduate school, and I'm a scientist, as you probably know. I'm walking down Chestnut Street in Philadelphia, and across the street I see a woman who's a friend of mine. She's walking the other direction with another woman. I cross the street and say hi, and her name was Corinne. She said, "Oh, Tony, I couldn't see you. I've just lost my glasses. We've been over in the Annenberg Performing Arts Plaza at the university, and I've lost my glasses, and we've been looking for them for an hour, and I'm sorry I couldn't see you." And then something interesting happened. All of a sudden, my consciousness was about 15 feet above me, looking down as the words came out of my mouth. "Come with me, I know where they are." So the women turned around and we walked 2 blocks to the Annenberg Plaza, where I'd not been for weeks. We entered the plaza without any cue at all. I walked over into the ivy, bent over, picked them up, and handed her glasses. And I was watching this whole thing. Well, this is kind of unambiguous, and I don't know who was more impressed at this, the women or me, but and then of course the word got out, and pretty soon whenever anybody lost anything, I'd get calls, "Tony, I'll be fine." It didn't work that way, but
I wish I could flip that on. Yeah.
this was a moment, and there was something which that's very reassuring, that there is another world, that things are coming to us in multiple ways.
Yeah.
And for whatever reason, I was a good antenna then, and I felt that. I have many more experiences. I'll not share them with you now, but let me just say that this was an important marker in my life, because it was unambiguous, totally unambiguous.
Right.
The nice thing too was that you listened, and a lot of people would maybe have that thought and dismiss it, but you went with
The words came out of my mouth before I could stop them.
kind of a bit of an
Give
altered
me a
state.
chance.
Yeah.
I said,
Well-
"Come to me, I know where they are." And I'm looking at myself, what? Oh, this is going to be interesting. What did you just say? This inner dialogue actually happened to the myself and my consciousness looking down at this person speaking and walking below. It was a very interesting experience.
Anyway, Tony, having your foot in both worlds, being able to see the universe externally, that you work with NASA, and then also having that internal world that's available to you, that is a profound connection, and that's probably the advanced level of scientific discovery, right? To be able to
I
have
think so.
a foot in both worlds, that direction as well.
Where science must go.
Yeah,
To embrace the
as
all.
an astrophysicist, and also as someone seeking that intimate connection with all of nature.
Let me say, it's not as rare as you may think. And scientists do not have a cold, hard way of doing things. They put attention on something. They study it out. They sleep it. They eat to it. They converse with it. And then inspiration comes. And then they go and apply the filter of the scientific method, which enables communication. So there is this confusion that scientists are different in life. And that's really, in my sense, of the many people I know in science and technology, and some very good ones, even Nobelists, that's not the way it works at all.
Yeah.
Well, I have had a mother explained to me that when her little boy is sitting in his little high chair at the dinner table and he takes his glass of milk and he turns it upside down, she cannot get upset because he's just being a scientist. He's wondering physics. What happens when liquid is, allowed to, gravity, I'm doing a gravity test, Mom.
That's a generous perspective. I like that one.
Yeah. And
Maybe we could all
so
do
I think
that
we're
at the-
all scientists. I wait for the day, Tony, and one of the reasons that Paul and I continue the mission of trying to add to the CI's Cuyamonga Institute's archives and why we take notes is we're trying to collect what data we can so that in the future, when this kind of data is deemed significant, worthy of a look, telling us something, that they'll have plenty of data to look at. All I can do right now is collect data until the enlightened science comes and says, "Hey, this is important. What do you got here? Let's."
Well,
let's
I
crunch
think
through it."
I think what you're doing is really important. And as Chris will tell you, and others will tell you, there's certain things we still can't talk about how these things happen. No matter where one's reputation is, you basically rely on the scientific method to be the communicator. But there are these things that are at the source, and the data you are gathering is almost unique and really invaluable. You're gathering it fairly objectively. You're not censoring it. You're not filtering it. You're not forcing it to fit into a mold. You're listening, and that's really a great thing to do.
Thank you, Tony. Well
Thank
said.
you for that.
Thank you.
Appreciate that.
Appreciate that. Thanks for your input.
I'm going to go to
David Night Eagle.
Okay.
Yeah.
But let me see. Whoops. I hit this button here. 1 second, David. I'm going to
Thank you, Tony.
release Tony, and then there you are, David. So, David, you are. Perfect. Hi, David. Good to see you. David is my brother. Lives in Mancos, not Mancos, but actually outside of,
Cortez,
yeah,
Colorado.
yeah, in between
Yeah.
the two, looking at Mesa Verde from his home.
David's a ranger at the Mesa Verde National Park.
Yeah.
Built earthships, builds and plays the flute. Played for two first ladies.
And so Dave has been an important impact on my life. He shares stories of his grandfather, Lakota traditions, and he's come to our institute and been able to participate and lead us in pipe ceremony and other types of aspects, and just introduce us to a worldview that is just powerful, and it's inspiring, and it's one of those elements I think that inspires David, and fortunately he's been able to pass it on to us as well.
Thank you. First of all, I really miss being at, as you say, Cuyamonga.
Yeah.
Paul likes to say it sometimes, but because it's a highly energized place of peace. It just whatever you might want to do in whatever modality you want to do it, it's possible at Cuyamonga, that's for sure. So I'm very blessed to be a park ranger. If I opened up my curtains, you could see Mesa Verde National Park. Over the many years I've worked there, I've found it to be an extremely spiritual place with much to offer in so many different time frames, going back 800, 1,000 years back to the present day. And the biggest joy I have is sharing that with our thousands of visitors that come in, teaching them how to open themselves up to not just what they're seeing, but what they can feel at Mesa Verde National Park. So that's a wonderful opportunity to be able to do that on every work day I'm up there. I'd like to say something about Tony. He and I share something in common, with him being a painter and my being a flute player. People often, he said the brush leads the hand. Is that kind of what he said?
Yeah.
And people often ask me, because I at least take one flute into the park and play it whenever possible for visitors and all, especially after a tour of one of, Longhouse or Cliff Palace or wherever we might be on a backcountry tour maybe, at the very end, because I try to teach people that I can fill them with a lot of scientific data. How many rooms this Cliff Palace or cliff dwelling has, or how many kivas, or this and that, but they won't remember that. But what they will remember is how they emotionally embrace the site and what they allow the site, how they allow the sight to impact them. And at the end, playing the flute kind of helps them put a stitching around that so they can hold on to that feeling for a long period of time. Earlier on, I don't remember the person's name that was speaking, but they brought to mind when discussing, like with all the things you said, Laura, about how you can experience an ecstatic trance in different ways, temperature, taste, smell, all these different things. There are many occupations that people can have on the planet today that you have to, it's not a choice, you have to embrace situational awareness. Certainly a soldier on deployment somewhere, a police officer, a fireman, park rangers. There's so many jobs that embracing situational awareness is so important. And even though I was an investigator for the state of Colorado for many years, and that was drilled into you every day. You had to practice situational awareness. And when I left that job after quite a few years, I never lost situational awareness around you. And that's in the physical world. Somebody pointing a gun at you, somebody sneaking around a corner, a fire breaking it, whatever. But you can also embrace it in the spiritual sense, situational awareness, going into the woods by yourself, being by the ocean shore, anywhere you go in nature, you can embrace situational awareness and allow things to come to you and talk to you and speak to you. And you can ask questions and hear answers. Paul and Laura helped me with a 29-year-old electrical engineer that was trying to find her path in spirituality. And recently she just got back from 1 week by herself in the mountains of West Virginia. Mm-hmm. And she had never done anything like that before. And coming in touch with self through nature had to be a very grand experience. I haven't had a chance to speak with her yet. But I guess my point is there's so much to embrace. All you have to do is open up yourself to it and look for it and allow it to impact you in whatever way you can. I hope I wasn't long-winded on that. But
no, it's a beautiful point, and I'm going to add that to the list of our senses.
Situational awareness is really, yeah, exactly.
And
Cam is very familiar with it, being a police officer and also his military background as well.
I think that's a wonderful sense. Yeah. And what's interesting to me is that we have situational awareness in the trance state. You know what's going on, even though you're not told or you don't know how you know. Don't stop to analyze it. You don't want to engage the intellect. But we just know what's going on. We've got situational awareness. I never thought of that as a sense. That is so true. And that if you want to take in the energies, you can be in your ordinary waking state because you've got the capacity to understand the subtler situational awareness of the energy around you, the life force around you, the earth around you. Yeah. That's beautiful, David. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
And the last thing, my grandfather taught me, and, I've been in the Kiva Cuyamonga many times and spoken with many other guests you have there. And even though I tend to follow the traditional Lakota old school spirituality, I guess you could say, my grandfather always taught me that all you have to do when you want to connect with spirit, whether it's through ecstatic trance or whatever, you're by yourself in the woods, is look for the doorway. He referred to it as a doorway. Yeah. You might want to refer to it as a path or just the way, Mm-hmm. And he gave you something on this reality to look for, but then once you went through that doorway, you were in another reality, So that's what I try to do at Mesa Verde. And a lot of times you need to have silence, but other times playing the flute and hearing a drum, like during one of your trance sessions, hearing that drum helps pull you in through that doorway. Because it can be difficult for some people passing through that doorway. They want to fight it because too much of them is in the current reality. So anyhow, I've loved everything you all have presented today. And thank you. I plan on coming back soon.
Okay. Well, David, yeah,
Thanks,
and David, there's a company called Night Eagle Flutes, which is flutes that he designed and made and set up and structured and designed. Is also David Night Eagle CD, music, and all that kind of stuff. And if you're ever going to go to Mesa Verde, ask specifically for Night Eagle if you're going to go on a tour. He plays the flute in some of the places and shows you the acoustical properties of Mesa Verde, which you're not going to get from anybody else on the tour. So he's the guy to go to. And then, of course, he also teaches over at Crow Canyon as well with flute. So anyway, David, it's a pleasure.
One of these
to have
days
you.
you'll have to play your flute for us.
Yeah, we'll have you come back on the flute.
Talk about
Yeah, we'll do that.
Thank you.
Okay.
All right.
Thanks, David.
And unfortunately, I have to beg off. I was supposed to be somewhere 20 minutes ago. So
That's
Thank
okay,
you.
David.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
we'll join in again.
Yeah.
Tell them why you're late. Blame
Yeah,
us.
you can blame me. Okay, so
Thank
now,
you.
those of who else did you want to meet? Oh, Christine, we wanted to get your
Oh, yeah.
input on some of the discussion today. I know some people had already previously said they would like to participate today, so that's why we're calling on people. But also, you can raise your hand under the reactions button, and we'll call on you as well. Then I go to Lillian.
Everything was great. Everything was well said. I like the different commentaries from David just now, which his comments were just so in line with Dr. Goodman. The way she talked about you need the ritual key to open that doorway, and she definitely thought it was a rattle in the drum. So I felt like David was almost in line 100% with Goodman's writings in her various books. I'm reading an interesting book by Jess Haldenbach, and I borrowed it from the library on mysticism. I think it's upside down. Mysticism. But what I like about this is he points out we can all have mystical experiences, but it's not really mysticism until we process it, internalize it, and let it impact us in a real way. And I think that's really important. I think a lot of people in today's society may say they may have a really beautiful light thing happen to them where they see beautiful lights, but they think, oh, I'm tired, blood sugar crash, something was wrong. And then other people might see that as very revealing. And when they seem it's revealing, that's when it really becomes the mystical. And I think it's really important for the processing. What I do love about Kuya-Munge and with everything you guys have been doing for last year is it really helps us internalize and put it together so we can understand it. Because I think that so many of us, if we're just doing it in a vacuum, or we have something, we don't know how to process it. So I feel like your real contribution, Laura and Paul, is helping us process it, being allowed to share, no judgment. Tony said that too, so that we can begin to process it. I think it's just a wonderful year in review with mysticism. So again, I'm going to say to Cam, you should join us some Saturday. I think it gives us a lot of insights that we wouldn't have otherwise without what you guys do. So I really appreciate what you do.
Thank you. And,
Thank you for that.
and Christine's going to be on next week along with Fred Smith. Fred is a professor of religious studies at University of Iowa. Christine is an anthropology professor at the University of Missouri. And so that's going to be a really fascinating and fun discussion not to be missed.
I want to just mention your point of, do we process it or do we dismiss it when we have these anomalies or these experiences? And the lack of our worldview to embrace that forces many of us to just dismiss it, right? You can't talk about these things in polite society. You can't believe that this is worthy of your attention. This doesn't mean anything, right? Dismiss versus processing. And so I find that interesting in that isn't that we have different personalities that are more comfortable with the unknowns. I'm very comfortable with not knowing, very comfortable with, you have to be in that state of not knowing to take some new data in. Right? I don't know what this means, but I'm willing to believe it. The other part of it is, and some people are very threatened by a worldview that doesn't fit their parameters, and so they will break any bridge that tries to step over and outside and beyond the boundaries. So it can be a personal thing as well, a personality thing. And I think that the going where the data leads is so brave for us. But it's also, for me, sanity making, because if I had to have these experiences that I did, and I had to put them in the realm of, oh, it's pathological, oh, it's crazy, oh, it's hallucination, all the demonization that Western society used to, not so much anymore, we're coming out of that, heap on it, you would have to conclude that you were crazy. And that is just the basis of mental illness, to think that you're crazy. It's so healthy to say, hey, I'm right, and this worldview is just lacking. I think it's a stance of empowerment, and to say that I have the sensory apparatus that I can trust. I trust it in everything else. Why not trust it over here? It's bringing in some data. I don't know what it means,
Right.
but I can trust that it's interesting data, that I can believe that I had this experience, and so do you, and you, and you, and you. What is it? Now we can begin to talk about it and start to process it. I hadn't really looked at the processing as a thing. We just do it. But you versus dismissing it, processing it. And I think that is so beautiful. I think that is going to help us focus on this and really put the bells and whistles to the processing. Thank you for that insight, Christine. That was a new one for us.
Look forward to next week.
It was just part of the ritual. No,
Also,
it's an important step to process it. And we're doing it by conversing. The discussion in a safe container space like this is part of the processing. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're brilliant. You're brilliant, gal.
And there's several YouTube videos with Christine presenting specific areas of research, and then also
And a podcast
as
where
well.
she talks specifically about Dr. Goodman's
yeah.
contributions
Sure.
and her own work.
I'm going to go to Lelania. Aloha from Hawaii.
Aloha. Well, great discussion. And thank you, everyone, for Laura Lee and Paul for all you do and everyone's great input. What I've been thinking about through the discussion is, well, I loved what Christine said about process, but I'm an artist painter. And what Linda said and others about her husband, David,
Yes.
is what I feel what we do with art is we bring the invisible into the visible so that people can process it and see it better, or learn to understand it. But they also, the person viewing it has a transformational experience viewing the image. But I think that ecstatic trance postures are doing the same thing, in that by processing it, we're bringing it to consciousness with words through the sharing. Because one of the things I first learned was that spirits are real. You know, that other world is real. And yeah, it's just so great to experience it and share it with everybody and bring that imaginary other world to our consciousness. So, aho, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so
And
much.
I hope by the conversation about art as used by ancients, as understood by ancients,
Yeah.
which Fred has a lot to say, Christine has a lot to say, that
I do
it
too.
becomes more important in our curriculum, just like imagination.
Right.
That process of taking what is in your realm and expressing it through art. When you look at the art of the ancients, it looks modern in so many ways. It's abstract, it's representational, it's surreal, it's so brilliant. And I also want to talk about how art impacts us, how art can be a carrier wave of information, of striking those chords deep within to tend to move us into an altered state. And I think I look forward to Linda Paladin because Brian introduced us to her artwork, David Paladin's, her husband's, late husband's artwork, David Paladin. And it is so mystical and so transfixed. It's like you step inside the frame.
An alternate reality.
And you're. So I think that symbol, mandalas, earth glyphs, the entoptic geometric forms, the colors, the representation, all of that. How is it? Why do we like to go into museums and just stare at the painting and walk into it, let it wash over us?
Right.
Why do we sit in theaters with really good live theater and we enter into a state of suspended disbelief and we walk into that storyline and we become part of it, a participant in some kind of, I just think that capacity for us to do that is so profound and utilized by our ancient cultures as memory codes, cultural knowledge, shift of consciousness, opening that doorway,
Right.
as well as the readout of what the iconography mean. When we look at cave walls and we see some of the same symbols over and over and over again, that is so representational to that culture of big concepts. We see the Nike check, we know, just do it, and what they're trying to brand that message. We see a swastika, and we go, okay, Hitler took that one over from ancient cultures, and it means this body of knowledge. We see a cross, and we go, oh, that's Jesus and Christianity. Huge body of knowledge in two simple lines.
Right.
So let's not take anything away from our ancestors who could download huge cultural, significant mythologies, meaning whatever, in a tiny glyph, and we read it and we've lost the meaning. But I will say that things that we can recognize, we saw on cave walls, like the back of a mammoth. So the head, the particular bump on the head, and the curve of his back going down, you see that over and over and over again, and you knew what that meant, mammoth. But we didn't know what the whole cultural story of the mammoth was, and what hero he played in their mythologies, or what he stood for. But I'm just saying that so mere simple lines in the context of a culture could hold huge meanings.
Well, that's the foundation.
That's the power of art.
And that's the foundation of our work. I mean, when you talk about
well,
Dr.
hello.
Goodman finding ritual instructions contained within the artwork of the ancients,
And it was
what-
her genius
that is the
insight to
connection,
decode it.
So
Yeah.
the transformation of information via a scribing on the wall, in a cave,
A few brush strokes.
petroglyph someplace, or whatever. And
Here's the human figure
there's
doing
information contained that you couldn't have written it out more. You could give us a full document.
You couldn't have written it in a language that would
Would-
continue through time
Through
and
time. It
mean
would
something
be lost through time.
to people without it being a symbol that
So,
can maybe
yeah.
activate some.
We need to.
We have deep cultural memories of the experience of the ritual.
Right.
Perhaps we have deep cultural memories of the artifacts, of the way that we can position our body, and that first sense, perioceptor sense, that speaks to us. I mean, who knows?
So even within our practice where we say, we want to journal after our experiences, the journal doesn't mean writing in straight lines. It might be something else that's
Mind
even more
mapping.
profound. And so students will pick up their papers and show us that what they're sketching and what's coming to them from their experiences. And it's always very profound and insightful. So,
Says a lot, yeah.
Okay,
A couple more. Let's get through everybody.
Cameron has got his hand up.
Oh, yay, Cameron.
Oh, yay.
You always have something interesting to add.
Hi, Cameron.
So,
Hey, how's it going, guys? Can you hear me?
Yeah,
Yeah.
we can hear you.
You brought up the aspects of people referring to you as crazy or touched or whatever else based on how you're talking about these subjects, right? And I was thinking to myself that, I wish I cared anymore about that. I really do wish I cared one iota about someone calling me crazy on these things. I'm so past that. I left that a long time ago.
Yeah.
me too. I had to deal with that one in childhood, believe me.
I don't have anything for it anymore. I really don't. I wanted to add one last thing that, I mean, when I said that, trying to do this without any kind of pretension at all, it's the idea of knocking out or learning to knock out all those things in your life that you're holding on so tightly to, that you have so much ego built into who you are. And learning to try to let go of those things, right? And by doing so, you're trying little by little to find ways to let go of things that make up some really bad habits, put it that way, about yourself. And this is again, these are things that I've been trying to work on for a while now. All right, and I've used similar techniques of what you guys talk about at the Kumagai Institute for myself, trying to do these kinds of things. And for me anyway, I think this is it's an important aspect of the concept of ego death to the trance state itself. But that's just my personal opinion.
Oh, that's
We
important.
say that it's really facing a dark night of the soul. You face yourself in this work. Can you let go? Can you cross your own barriers to meet
Anyway,
your mentors and your allies?
Yeah.
That's
That's my
part of it.
personal opinion, and thanks for letting me speak. Okay.
Yeah. Very good, Cameron. Thank you so much.
Is there anybody else? You better
Well,
wave your hand. We're taking
Mary,
just
Mary,
last
you had
thoughts.
your hand up a little earlier. Did I drop you
Oh,
off?
Mary, hello.
Thank you for your nice note to, and I'm sorry I hadn't gotten back to you. So many great sharings today, and I've got a million ideas, but I'll narrow it down. Sister Margaret mentioned the importance of the imagination. And in grad school, I actually did a research paper on the connection of imagination and development of imagination in children and moral development. Imagination, being able to put ourselves in other people's place or just imagining ourselves outside of ourselves, helps to develop empathy. So there's a real good argument for including that in the curriculum. Thank you for bringing that up.
Very, very cool.
Yeah, and the thing that I wanted to talk about before was, because 3 weeks ago we did the Olmec divination posture. And for the first time, I had a very, what I considered non-trance state. I just felt totally in my body, in the room, aware of everything that was going on around me, and didn't feel that I was getting into the posture. But then I had a very real experience of a large spider coming down, landing on my shoulder and nestling under my hair against my neck, and then giving me a little pinch and saying, "Arachnids have the answer." And I had no idea what that was about. But last weekend, I was part of a conference, a Jungian conference, and one of our speakers is a Jungian analyst who lives in Tesquite, New Mexico, pretty near Cuyamonga. And she just happened to mention in passing the Navajo story of grandmother's spider, and how her job is to come down from the heavens and weave her web of connection amongst all people and all things when she feels that we've become disconnected. So my question in the divination posture had been, how can I best serve the world through my work? And so I got that answer, that helping to weave this web of connection among humanity. And then a few days later, I was approached to be part of a planning committee for a worldwide event that this woman nearby started, called the 1,000 Goddesses Gathering, which is based on the Tibetan prophecy that when 1,000 goddesses gather to dance, it will help bring the world back into balance.
Beautiful. Yeah.
And the idea is to create this web of connection among these small satellite ceremonies where people work with water, earth. This year, the sacred womb, which is an Aleutian creation mythology.
Mm-hmm.
Cosmic womb. So people will come together, do these ceremonies in whatever form they feel drawn to do to help to create that web.
Oh, we'd like to plug us in.
Yeah, send us any information.
Or put it in the chat room so anybody can join. Because women's wisdom represents putting a foot in this world and a foot in that world. Mm-hmm. The male and the female coming in balance. The attributes of women and all that we bring, which represents that other realm more closely. We are the portals of life, right? Life comes through us. The goddess and the godhead, the marriage of the opposite, so much. And that's what we need to weave together to expand our worldview, right? This is part of the healing. Women to have our voice and take our rightful place, because men, I'm sorry, but you've made a mess of the world. Your testosterone has run amok. We need to get in there and help balance it. And not just dominate, we need to integrate.
Well,
Beautifully put. I want to be part of that 1,000 goddesses. Oh,
yeah, that'd be fantastic.
I always said that goddess, that girl stands for goddess in real life.
Oh yeah, I remember you had a work.
Yeah,
you had a group.
we had t-shirts that.
Had t-shirts and everything. Wow.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you, Mary. And
Thank you, Mary.
I mean, it does inspire me that not this season because of COVID still hasn't come, but next season, and we want to do some special events at the Institute in New Mexico. So maybe we'll do some kind of a goddess thing, and we'll have you come down from Taos and the whole thing, and we'll find a bunch of.
No, there's a goddess conference gathering, and you just bring what you have.
I know,
like
but we'll also do some other stuff because I want to re-energize the land, bring the institute back into focus.
I also want to say I
Thank you, Mary.
appreciate that you held your experience as such And then later the myth came to answer it. And I think that our experiences are spoken in a mythic language, that is the language of spirit. So many dialects there, but we know them, and our ancient peoples knew them. And so when the myth illuminates the trance experience, it is so beautiful when that happens, that we can again add another dialect to our lexicon, and we can say, I understand. A spider coming to you, the wisdom of the arachnid is the weaving, the connections, the networking, the building the bridges. So, yeah, that was so beautifully told. Thank you for that.
Perfect. Thank you, Mary.
Yeah.
I want to, by way of concluding today, because we've run out of time, I just want to talk a little bit about the fact that all of the things that we talk about, I want to make sure we also understand that it does take discipline. It does take focus.
That's true.
It's not just, there's no magical practice out there in the world that's going to change our life forever, and that we haven't done the homework necessary to get there. So if you want, living life with purpose, finding that inspiration, just remaining in your center, and then looking for the benefits. Because if you want to have the healing benefits that come with this kind of work, you want to feel that your life is evolving, that there's movement forward, all of those kinds of things. It takes discipline. It's not
Showing
magic. Showing up and
And
doing the work.
also just quieting the doubting monkey mind.
Yeah, and
Right.
it does, and also whether you're doing some sort of a meditation or you're doing what we're doing, whatever the practice is, that also takes discipline to maintain it in your schedule. Whether you're doing yoga, whether you're doing this kind of thing or that, you're doing your morning prayers, whatever your ritual is, whatever the thing that surrounds you in your life, finding time for that. We really want to have your feedback to continue to give us inspiration as we go forward too with the work that we're doing, because it's really important that as a community we feel like we're doing something that contributes, that's something that has a meaning beyond the ego part of being a director of an institute or whatever. Like, that doesn't have any meaning without the fact that there's true progress, that there's evolution taking place, that there's something powerful to the practice itself. Don't need any of that spiritual, magical thinking. We want to make sure that there's real stuff, things you can stick your fingers into happening.
I never have any doubt on that, but
Well,
it's nice to get confirmations.
I'm calling.
Yeah.
I'm making a call. I'm calling to all of you as we go forth with this work and the work that you do.
Drop us an email and tell us what it means to you.
Yeah.
That would be very, very helpful. And this is not a replacement for any of your other practices. We need different practices for different
Right.
pieces of us.
Right.
And this is one that is so very much added to one's repertoire, is compatible with everything. There's no dogma, there's no belief system, doesn't take a lot of time. And you got this great community here
Yeah.
to practice it with.
It's such a pleasure that we get to follow and hold the tent pole up for what Dr. Goodman started. And so the world of COVID has had some horrific side effects, but at the same time, there's been some positive things where we've learned to navigate the world differently. And having access to you around the planet and the experiences that are being shared with us has been so beneficial, so powerful, and so inspirational. So we thank you for your participation, coming to these Sunday sessions, also participating in the Ecstatic Trance Posture work. We want to continue.
Well, I see that Mother Nature in the pandemic pretty much said, humanity, go to your room.
Mm-hmm.
You have some thinking to do, some inward stroke here to do. And I also think that, like Cam said, you have this outer life, but you also need the doorway, like David said, into the inner life. You need doorways, many doorways.
Right.
Many doorways that demonstrate how beneficent and benevolent this magical universe is. It's given us many, many doorways. So we choose a few, and we go within at intervals as needed. So
coming back to
maintain the balance, right? A foot in this world, a foot in that world.
Coming back to the original topic today about worldview. And so the pandemic impact has shaken the worldview. What we thought was real and solid and concrete, it was never going to change, was busted and broken down.
Yeah, climate change is going to do that
before
as well.
we all go back to that world again, because it's very easy to slip back into the patterns prior to COVID, but I don't know. I think most of us are smart enough to know that there's something unstable about putting all of our eggs in that basket. We need to come back to this other alternative reality and integrate that into our lives in a more powerful way.
Thank you.
Well,
Thank you for today. It was really fun.
Blessings
Made our
to you
hearts
all.
sing
And I'm gonna,
to hear the collective wisdom of our group.